Over the last few years in my work and research, I've been looking at the way in which digital technology, which here includes production software and platforms, has commodified and now potentially automates a range of human capacities, things that we all like to do: artistic and creative production, sociality, communication, entertainment, desires for connection, and so on. So sort of going right back, and we might have to make a couple of conceptual leaps here to kind of fit my work into today's framework in terms of what a public is, but following on from concepts like free labor or the multitude or the general intellect, right back to Marx and his ideas around machines as the formalization of knowledge into productive apparatus. So I'm looking at generally at the way in which intellectual, creative, and social and emotional tendencies of everyone who uses digital devices are incorporated into a kind of machinic mode of production that figures the public as a sort of resource for extractive processes. And so my recent works have kind of involved speculating on the future of streaming services and generative AI and social media, and in particular, the kind of data-driven personalization that they do to imagine how this set of platforms and techniques might come together in the future. I'm just going to play the first couple of minutes of this work, which is online, and you can look at the rest of it at some point if you'd like.
Narrative 001. The things we like. This video is the first known example of an APVN, or Automated Personalized Video Narrative. Produced in the year 2142, it is one of trillions that now populate the Earth's single remaining streaming and multimedia entertainment platform, Worldio. If you continue watching, you will learn about Worldio's core features and some of the events leading to its creation. Perhaps most importantly, we will discuss some of the shifting mentalities, cultural norms, and attitudes that have accompanied its widespread adoption. The creation of this video marked the beginning of a new era in media production and consumption, in which the human, abstracted into a series of qualitative and quantitative data points, became a kind of preset, or blueprint, from which infinite streams of media and interactive environments could be generated. This video was produced in the absence of any direct human labor, and is based entirely on the aesthetic preferences and proclivities of a discrete human being, the identity of whom has been lost to history. In the same way a user recalls a preset on a synthesizer in order to begin a composition, Worldio recalls a user profile to create a world, a narrative, a soundtrack, and, if desired, a system of interactive parameters. AVPNs like the one you are watching resemble what were once discrete genres and forms: music, narrative cinema, documentary, literature, games, text and user-generated content, combined to create unique media objects and experiences. Although linear narrative and musical OPNs are still common, they also encompass virtual environments where users congregate online in enormous numbers. What you are seeing and hearing is based on an array of qualitative interests and aesthetic preferences, along with quantitative data capturing attention spans, levels of synaptic stimulation and emotional reactions to various life experiences, and formal devices such as editing, color grading, narrative arcs, musical accompaniments, and so on.
Okay, turn down the audio and just let that play for a little bit. So we're in the 22nd century, and Worldio, this platform, is the only remaining streaming platform that automates the production of media, all kinds of media content based on personal user profiles. So, and this, what we're watching, is sort of framed as a kind of, this AVPN is an early test in which Worldio, the platform, is sort of narrativizing its own history and describing what it does. It's maybe, a sort of early test that was produced for a particular user based on their user profile. And go back to my slides now. I was asked to revisit this work for another conference, and this line here, which is in the script, although this data appears qualitative, the distinction between qualitative and quantitative data has effectively collapsed. And so I began thinking about, in the tech economy, kind of what this collapsing distinction between these two types of data, or the desire to produce this collapse, kind of means, coming from the designers of platforms. And if we think about these different types of data, like quantitative data, if we're talking about surveying a species or monitoring a production line or counting click-throughs or something like that, quantitative data is quite close to the world that it indexes. But of course, qualitative categories like emotions or preferences or things like this are kind of more slippery. And of course, this has been going on for a long time. If we think about, Leibniz or someone like that, this idea that the model might one day directly correlate to the world, even though we kind of know that relationship is unstable. So, I got to thinking about this idea of a quantitative collapse and thinking about the attitudes of people in the tech industry and their desires and what they would like to do if they kind of had the means to do this, to kind of capture and analyze and optimize all the qualitative dimensions of human desires and experiences and perceptions. So, in the context of media production and data science and platformization, technical innovation is sort of driven forward by a desire to fully integrate the quantitative with the qualitative. So with these works, I was sort of trying to take this desire seriously and think about, not that I think a platform like this will necessarily happen, but what the outcome of those desires might be if they could, and just to kind of, although I hate to give these people airtime.
That so the one that we're just starting to roll out more now is
Zuckerberg's glow up here, but this is him kind of talking about one platform or service that they're kind of rolling out at the moment.
Call it AI Studio, and it basically is a set of tools that eventually is going to make it so that every creator can build sort of an AI version of themselves as sort of an agent or an assistant that their community can interact with. There's kind of a fundamental issue here where there's just not enough hours in the day, right? It's like if you're a creator, you want to engage more with your community, but you're constrained on time. And similarly, your community wants to engage with you, but it's tough. I mean, there's limited time to do that. So the next best thing is allowing people to basically create these artifacts, right? It's
So he's talking about people creating a kind of AI version of themselves, but also producing media that is kind of based on their preferences and proclivities. So you can kind of imagine if something like this was really a platformized, this is sort of what they're going for. And the way that I first kind of got to thinking like this was through looking at Spotify and this particular presentation that I went to with this group of Spotify engineers, and they were talking about this mixed method approach to working on their various models that involves kind of bringing the quantitative researchers and the qualitative researchers together. So streaming platforms like Spotify are really kind of at the leading edge of doing this type of work. These are some ads, some Spotify ads that we can see here. But if we kind of keep looking through at some of the data techniques that they use, these are some kind of latent vector spaces that represent machine learning models that Spotify uses to recommend content to their users. And of course, these models don't really look like this, and data scientists don't really use these visualizations, but they're used to kind of communicate to people what they kind of look like or what they do. So, this one is a kind of graphical representation of all the music on Spotify by kind of genre. As you can see, there's a kind of dizzying array, and it's a pretty kind of interesting thing to click through. And you can see this is how it's sort of organized here. There's a couple more models. So we can see, again, this is a kind of representation of Spotify's like entire catalog, but users are also in the catalog. So they have 3 different models that they use to recommend songs to you. So if a user next to you in the latent space is listening to a song that you're not listening to will be pushed into your recommendations. So that's one of them. And they have another that's kind of based on music journalism. And then they have, this series of parameters, many of which are qualitative, so they have this I don't know if anybody knows this song, but it's 79% danceable, apparently. Whereas there's one called, it's 69% happy, which is pretty weird. It's like, the themes of this song are quite complex. Anyway, so that really kind of got me thinking about, this collapsing distinction and how platforms try to quantify these types of experiences and feelings and emotions into a kind of score. And then that's part of what they use to recommend content with you. And then I got to thinking, well, okay, maybe the next step is like, instead of recommending content that already exists, why wouldn't they just try and use that data to just produce content that they know you will like? And so this is kind of what like the world of Worldio imagines. Some reason. So these are some kind of representations of the top 10 songs. I think this is from 2018. So you can see that, the top 10 songs are all pretty similar. So like they're good at this and they kind of know what they're doing in some way in terms of recommending things that are similar. And if you use the Spotify radio feature, like if you go to a song and then you go to radio, it will just play all these songs that have similar parameters. To finish up, what I've kind of imagined here is like, instead of a model that's prompted by a user, with a line of text, imagine a model that's sort of prompted by you as a bundle of qualitative preferences that have been rendered quantitative. So, there's this kind of idea of an echo chamber of one that's endlessly entertaining and thinking about this is the kind of horizon of like the platform economy is kind of what I tried to imagine. All right, so from there, this is kind of a work in progress, and this is a user of the platform, Jackson, who's kind of telling us about his experiences and how he feels about what Worldio, some kind of like user profiles. So we'll watch a bit of this and then time.
Hi, my name is Jackson. I'm 34 years old and I like disaster movies, or just any content along those lines. It's kind of my thing. It's all I watch on Worldio. Sometimes I ask myself, why do I like this stuff? It's a good question. Apocalypse and disaster have always been attractive to me. I like to watch it and think about what comes after all this stuff that seems so normal now. Imagine worlds with different priorities, ethics, ways of being and dying. I've come to realize it is a little perverse, this desire to witness destruction. But I don't know how else the world could change, at least not in a way I would notice myself. I sometimes wonder, why do I want to watch things exploding, flooding, burning, ending, but I guess also sometimes surviving? It just seems like it would be cool in some way, to witness a world reborn. It's like the start and the end of something at the same time. I know that, for some people, apocalypses have already happened, and they're happening all the time, and that some people have no choice but to live on, hoping things will change again. But for me, personally, it would be a new sort of experience, I guess. Before Worldio, we used to see apocalypse every day, in our feeds, our devices, real people suffering. So maybe we used to witness these things in some way. But it was different there. It was too realistic and it didn't look cool. I couldn't feel it in the way I liked. But now these things are always seductive. I sometimes think, well, who would I be if I survive? What crew would I take up with? What kind of person would I be? How would everything change? Would everything be worse, or would some things be better? Anyway, I digress. Before this whole algorithm-generated thing came along, I used to watch other kinds of stuff more. But now I just watch this, It's disaster born, I guess. But it's what I like the most, so it just kind of took over my whole feed, to the point where all there was disaster. But then, the world was full of disaster too. So eventually it seemed like I may as well be watching the same thing. It's looked better on Worldio, sure. But also, what's the difference? Even in my own world. Thinking about my family, there had been quite a lot of disaster in our past. My mother's house burned down. My father was unwell and always imagined there was some kind of disaster unfolding, or that people were against him. My grandmother...
This is, one character, one guy who's kind of using this platform and thinking about it in his own kind of critical way, I suppose. So I just wanted to finish with, like, if we think about the human experience as a kind of, one of these latent vector spaces, thinking about where we as individuals might fit into it, and were there to be content that sort of in some way perfectly satisfied our various desires, kind of what might that look like? And, what might our scores be in terms of, if we imagine all the kind of things that we like to listen to and watch, and what if they were to be kind of like, quantified, what the score might be between, 0 and 1. And yeah, so that's it. That's what I've been doing. And I suppose thinking about, in terms of Caleb's introduction and colonialism as a mode of extraction, kind of looking at the way in which the tech industry tries to turn humans into a kind of productive resources, kind of extension of kind of Euro-American colonialism in a way where it sort of turns inward. So yeah, that's it.